At the end of the last episode, I was welding an extension piece into the handle, so we're going to start this episode with me smoothing out the weld. I decided after fitting the front caster wheels that I wasn't entirely happy with them just being attached using 3 bolts, so I marked out a set of plates that I could weld into the base frame or would allow me to install the extra bolts. With the plates fully welded in, I reattached the caster wheels so I could mark where I needed to grind the welds flat so the caster wheels could sit flush. With the wheels able to sit flush, I marked out the position of the final 2 bolt holes. With the base finished, I could move on to cutting the necessary notches in the uprights. This was the last job that was required before I could assemble the base, middle and top frames together. With the notches cut in the rear uprights, I moved on to the front ones. The notches at the bottom of the front 2 uprights were a little bit more complicated and required the use of my digital angle finder. This slightly more complicated notch was made so when the front two uprights were welded in their lean back position, the front could be hammered back and welded into place. With the one side all notched, I just had to make a mirror image for the other side. I started this by laying the other side piece of angle iron on top of the one I just notched and clamped them together. I did this so that I could make sure I wouldn't make an identical side, because let's be honest, we've all accidentally done that before. With all the uprights cut, notched and prepped for welding, we can now assemble the rest of the car. As you can see, I've already put one on, so let's crack on and get the other three attached, and then put in the top two frames. This is a stage in the build where being careful and as accurate as possible in making individual parts starts to pay off. With the upright clamped in place and checked for squareness, I can tack weld it into place. With the rear uprights tack welded in place, I moved on to attach the front ones. I temporarily used the upper frame to keep spacing between the uprights correct. With the angle check, I can tack weld the upright in place. Yeah, I really need more space.
The next bit we're going to have to do outside because there isn't enough height between my bench and my garage door to stand this upright. Once again, I really do need more space.
With the frame outside, I can now manoeuvre the top frame into place. As I've got all my uprights tack welded into place almost spot on, the top frame pretty much dropped into place. As they say, measure twice, cut once. Or, as it was in this case, measure about 50 times in different ways, go back and check your measurements just to be sure, tack weld it all together, and then check your measurements again just in case you screwed up. With the upper frame tacked in place, I prepped the middle one to go in. This started with me grinding the welds on the corners flat, and then removing the mill scale so it could be welded in place. With the middle frame prepped for welding, I marked where it was to be welded on the uprights. You may also notice that I'm back working in the garage. After moving some stuff around and making some temporary adjustments to my bench, I was able to get the welding trolley onto it and underneath the garage door while it was open. This was a good thing because, as you're probably about to hear, the rain was about to come in. Like everything on this project, measurements were double checked. And checked again.
Right, now I've got it all lined up. I get to take it apart again so you can clean up and prep where it needs to be well.
With that done, I could tack weld the middle frame in place. Now, this is the one bit I will admit I got wrong despite my best efforts. Somehow, the middle frame had become slightly twisted when I welded it together. I aligned 3 of the corners and tack welded them in place and made sure that the fourth was slightly too low so that I could use a clamp to pull it up into position before finally tack welding it in place too. With everything tack welded together and checked for a final time, I could then set about fully welding the trolley.
Those notches that I cut in those front bars was for a reason, so I could do this. With the frame all welded up, we can now weld on this tube which will hold the axle for the rear wheels.
The first step was to mark the position of where the axle tube would go. Before prepping the areas for welding. A quick measure of the frame was needed to determine the length of the axle tube. Before cutting the axle tube to length.
Now, I'll be honest with you, I hate painting stuff. So much in fact that generally when I build homemade bits of equipment or tools, I don't bother. However, in this instance, I am going to paint it. I will continue the trend of laziness though and use everybody's favourite direct-to-metal coating. Huh, that was easy. With the framework all painted, the next job is to start reassembling it. So we're going to start by fitting the wheels.
Fitting the front wheels was relatively simple, apart from having to run a tap through the mounting holes to clear the threads of some paint that had got into them. With the front wheels bolted on, I moved on to the rear. This required me to make a new axle, as this welding trolley is wider than my old one. To make the new axle, I needed to drill some holes through the side of a 12mm bar, so the split pin that retains the wheels in place could be fit. With the axle slid in place with one wheel, I could fit the second one and figure out the length of the axle and the position of the second split pin hole. With the position determined, I drilled the hole for the second split pin, and then cut the axle to length. With the wheels fitted and the welding trolley the right way up, I moved on to fitting the handle and the hooks to the sides. This once again required me to clear tapped holes made earlier of any paint that had made their way into them.
With everything assembled on the welding cart, there's one last thing I need to do, and it involves sorting out this problem.
My solution to the problem was to fit some plywood shelves to the trolley. As always, I wanted to keep the cost down, so I recycled some shelves that would fit to the back of my friend's red OS Bass by the previous owner. Max, if you're watching, thanks for the free plywood. With one shelf not brilliantly cut out, I just had to repeat the process for the others.
Of all the fancy equipment I've got, and a power saw is not one of them.
top shelf required a few notches cutting out to clear the bolts that held the handle on.
Regardless of how I cut all 4 shelves out of this plywood, I was never going to be able to cut them all in one piece. Now this isn't as bad as it sounds, because if I cut the middle shelf as one piece, I wouldn't have actually been able to get it into the frame. So the fact that I've had to do it as 2 pieces, well, it's going to happen one way or another.
Using the offcuts from the other shelves, I went and marked out 2 pieces that were to make up the middle shelf. I could have probably made them symmetrical and put the joint perfectly in the middle of the trolley, but I was lazy and marked them out in such a way that I had to do as little cutting as possible.
With this lot cut, all we've got to do now is put it in position on the welding cart.
First is the bit at the back that goes into the gas bowls. Next, the middle shelf went in. Then the base shelf, which due to the design of the frame, needed the front end to be positioned first. And finally the top shelf, making sure that the notches lined up with the bolts for the handle. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the finished welding trolley. That's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then please hit that like button and share. If you want to get notified of any future how to build projects, then please hit that subscribe button and remember to turn on the notification bell. And finally, you can click on one of the links on the screen to see some of my other how to build projects and also some other projects that I'm working on. Once again, thanks for watching.